There you go.
Yeah, it's recording now.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to the second in our four-part series, Painters on Painters. Gerard and Michael are very thorough researchers. I always learn something from their programs, and I am sure that you will too. And so thank you for joining us, gentlemen, all yours.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Thank you. And
Thank you,
welcome.
Joanne, and welcome, everybody.
Yes.
But we have to remember to talk one at a time, I guess.
Yes, that is really the big thing. Challenge of the day, right? You know.
Go ahead.
So, you want me to start, Michael?
Go ahead.
So I will say, welcome, and we're very happy. It's an evening of the week, but we will spend the time of talking about, Mark Rothko. But before that, we have been painting for a long time together. So we are proposing this program to give you an approach, not so much academic, but on painter. So New Wave Production is my small production nonprofit in art and education. And we will talk, and we did already talk about Basquiat. Today is Rothko, and we will continue in the next few months with Picasso and Christo and Jean-Claude. So
Christo and Jean-Claude, wait, let's get their order right. Christo and Jean-Claude are first in September, and then Rothko and then Picasso in December.
Yeah, so, but anyways, the idea is like to give you a vision of what art is, but by the vision of painter. So that's what we're trying to do.
So it's not us who are visionaries necessarily.
No,
it's the artists.
Yes. Yeah, so as you can see, was filmmaker too. We talk about filmmaker through my program too. So first things I want to say, before and very fast is that every aspect of society, every event in society is affecting the artists. Artists in general, almost all the time, are the soul of society. They are the vision of society. So everything who happened during Rothko life, from the 1900 he was living, everything has an effect directly or indirectly. And you can see it. World War I is a huge effect on the surrealists. I will talk about it, and on him too indirectly, and the pandemic too, and the Great Depression. But I think the Great World War I was a terrible war and affected all art in a very, very strong way. And we will talk, when we talk about the surrealists, how it did. So this and the Great Depression, 1929, this makes the people see it in a different way, and they went through it. So they are visionaries in the sense that they show you what happened at that time, but they are too affected by it. So they have two things that you can see. And up to World War II, all these aspects, social aspects, many aspects are affecting always the artist. The artist, again, it's a sensitive plate or the sensitivity or the emotion of society. Of course, World War II, Hitler in power, as you know, Mark Rothkowitz was Jewish. So the bomb, the TV, all these inventions have a straight, direct effect on the art world. And when we talk about the influence of all these people who influence Rothko, we will see this in a more closer way, how all these elements affected his life.
And Rothko was born in 1903. He was born in Dvinsk, and his name was Marcus Rothkowitz, a nice Jewish boy born in Russia, as was I, by the way.
You were not born in Russia.
I might as well have been.
Yeah.
No, my ancestors were born in Russia.
Michael Frankovitz. Right?
Michael Frankovitz. Yeah, that's right. My name was changed too.
Yeah. Sure. Oh, I'm sure they did. I'm sure.
Anyway, he didn't shorten it till quite a few years later, but we'll get to that. In 1910, his father moves from Dvinsk to the United States and goes to live with his brother and in Portland, Oregon. Some of the important bio information that I just wanted to go through quickly, and of course, influential moments in his life. He emigrates to the United States in 1913, a little bit after his father, settling in Portland, Oregon. And a year later, he loses his father. His father died of cancer. In 21, he was an excellent student. He graduates from Lincoln High School in Portland and goes to Yale, gets a full scholarship to Yale with a couple of friends of his. But after a year, because of protests from the highfalutin guys at Yale, because these three guys were all Jewish. They lose their scholarship, and he decides that that school is not for him, and then drops out. In 1923 to 1927, he leaves school and settles in New York City. Well, he's not really settled yet. He's going back and forth between New York and Portland, actually. But he begins studying on and off at the Art Students League in the city. He's not really a student yet there. He's visiting friends. He sees that they're drawing nudes, and he says, I want to be an artist. This is the life for me. So he ends up studying with George Bridgman, who wrote the book on anatomy that I used in college, in art school. And he studies with Max Weber, who was a pretty well-known a Cubist painter in the States. And he sees Duchamp's large glass at the Brooklyn Museum, which we'll talk a little bit about later. In 1929, of course, the Great Depression begins, and here's a great shot of his family, just newly settled in Portland. Still, you know, the Rothkowitz family is very tied into, you know, being immigrants. They are not settled at all in the country. They're very nervous about what's going on with Hitler and all that. So but he's got to lead a normal life, and he gets to the Lincoln High School in Portland, and these are the other two fellows who were his friends in high school, Harry Director and Max Neymark, and they all got those scholarships to Yale, which were pulled after the first year. A couple of interesting influences, teachers, exhibitions. 1928 to 33. Of course, he was in and out of the Art Students League and studied with Max Weber. But his first show that he was included in as Marcus Rothkowitz happens in this period. And he meets the great painter Milton Avery, and also the great painter, and becomes great friends with Adolf Gottlieb. Avery was a little older than him, but Avery took him under his wing and really helped Rothko in many ways, even financially. Hosted him for dinners. His wife and him and Milton were very, very good friends with Rothko, and sort of carried him through. The Whitney Museum opened in this year, 1933. 35 to 40, the 10 was formed, which was a kind of a dissenters group from a show that they had at the Whitney. Now, the funny thing about the 10 was that there were never 10. It was always 9 members. But they began protesting conservative policies at art establishments like the Whitney, and they were very sympathetic to the expressionists who were coming in and working in the WPA, the Works Progress Administration program. They have a series of shows as a group, and then they disband in 1940 because they were getting well known and becoming individual names in their own right.
Michael, let me just add something about
Sure.
their position. Let's not forget that they were really artists, but they had a very, very strong political position. So they were really left, like most of the artists at the time. And this is very important to know, that they were not like stand by as people. They had a very, very strong, political conviction. And this is just before World War II. It's important, because the connection with these people is not just an idea of being artists. They are politically really tuned into the same vision of a better society. Being Jewish and communist was something really, kind of this time. Like when we talk about the surrealism, how really involved they were with politics too. I think it's very important to know.
And the big thing that was happening in the country was social realism. Painters were painting figures. There was, we talked about, when we did the Pollock talk, we talked about Pollock's influences and social realism with Thomas Hart Benton, but things are moving away from that. And as you can see, Picasso here, the Picasso effect, I call it. Once Picasso became known in this country, things blew up, and expressionism was becoming very, very popular. Even still, Picasso was doing figures, but man, he was really, really the king of art in the world. At this time.
Yeah.
So post World War II, World War II was obviously an incredible event. And what happened from 1937 to 42, Roosevelt started the WPA program, which was a program that was established to help artists and other folks get through the Depression. The WPA was very, very influential and effective and helpful for many of these artists. Some were in the Mural program and some were in the easel program. Rothko was in the easel program. In 1940, another group that was formed, like the 10, was the Federation of Modern Painters and Sculptors. And that group was made up of artists like Avery, Baziotis, Molotowski, Gottlieb, Rothko, David Smith, Joseph Stoll, to name a few. And then some influential exhibitions in New York City was Picasso, of course, the 40 years of his art, which was a show at the Museum of Modern Art, which had just recently opened, and then a show also of Surrealists, Jean Moreau and Salvador Dali, also at MoMA. Very, very influential exhibitions, and people were just blown away, knocked out, and also saying very terrible things about these guys. And Gerard's going to talk a little bit about the influence of major thinkers at the time.
Yeah. So let's remember, this is what Michael was talking after World War II, but we have to come to the roots of everything. And the roots of everything, they are the philosophy and psychoanalysis, are the roots of how all these artists are going to be connected to each other. And of course, going after World War I, we will see what's going on next. But we have three people here who are very, very influential on all the art world. At the middle, you have Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, obviously, is the father of psychoanalysis. Lesson of psychoanalysis in 1900, he brings these theories that we are not really aware of everything that we are doing, but the subconscious and the unconscious are there. And two, Freud was really involved with libido and sexuality. This was the center of his work. He had a student, Carl Jung, and Jung, for Rothko, was the one who influenced him the most, because Carl Jung, instead of following the path of Freud, he worked with him, he was his student, but at one time he decided to go in a different way of talking psychology analysis, in a way that the human is not just about his sexuality or his relationship, but it is about his environment. So he developed an idea with social collectivism, that we are all connected by something. And Jung will be interested by archetype, by different culture, by different religion. And he's like the most explorator of like psychoanalysis in one way, and the most new wave of this time, in psychoanalysis. So Jung is a super, super strong figure for Rothko, for all the intellectual, But of course, the father of psychoanalysis is Sigmund Freud. And the other ones, you have Nietzsche. And Nietzsche had different theory, but really the main theory, it's the myth maker. He wrote this really very important thing, like the birth of the tragedy, where he talked about the Greek tragedy, and he talks about the myth. How is the myth helping us to live? And Rothko was really influenced by this. We're not going to really love the philosophical aspect of the two aspects of man, but this he'll say, and Rothko say very well, and all the people around him, that Greek tragedy, the tragedy helps you to survive, because it makes life very filled with images, with fantasy. Well, I will go to the steps that religion helps a man live, because he developed all this idea. And he says this, because of this, he helped men live by having all this myth. And for Rothko, as we're going to go through his painting, the idea of to be mortal as a human, it is the most important things. And we have to face it on a regular basis. He says, these are the things that's going to help you to face your mortality, and not giving up on this, but having a more spiritual experience of what life is. So he's there to give you a spiritual experience. And through Nietzsche, and through the theory of Nietzsche that he was really connected, this is what the goal of Rothko is. So I don't want to go too much into detail in this, but this is really what the two people you want to look at it or think about it, Carl Jung and Nietzsche.
The other thing about Nietzsche, just quickly, is that he had the theory about the intellectual versus the party animal, the emotional, and enjoying life, the Apollinian idea versus the Dionysian idea. These are kind of highfalutin philosophical existential ideas, but it gets down to the basic human element, which is you need to, really think about what you're doing, but you also need to feel and experience the emotion of things.
Yeah, finding a way to survive life was really what I think he tried to do. So going from there, we're going through all this intellectual, we go straight to the surrealists. The surrealists are the consequences or are the following of all these great thinkers, because the man that you have at the middle, André Breton, who is the head of the surrealist movement, came from the influence of Dada, and all this came from World War I. World War I, horrible war, horrible, difficult thing for society, and Dada will bring the surrealists to look at two things: to look at dream, to look at re-question everything, and to look at what are we doing with art? What is art? And taking all the possibility to explore everything. So for this, they are the ones who are going to break through from traditional art and bring, obviously, all this with abstract expressionists in 1940s, because all of them will come to the US. Salvador Dali will come to the US. You have a very beautiful painting of Gorgio de Chirico, who was really interested by mythology too, and taking Greek mythology and put him in a different aspect. So all these people are experimenting a different way of looking at the world, a different way of looking at art, and they bring this to the next step, who is really great for Rothko, because Rothko is an intellectual. When I say an intellectual, I say a pure intellectual. He's interested by all this, and he's going to take this, not just him, all the abstract expressionists.
In case you didn't understand what Gerard said.
Well, I'm sure they understand very well. Many people understand me.
I'm just want to clarify the name of the painter that you see, the painting on the right, is De Chirico. That, of course, the guy with the mustache is Dali. The other guy is André Breton.
Stop. Oh, André Breton, what are you doing? You're killing the French word.
And the painting on the left is Persistence of Memory, otherwise known as Melting Clocks.
And this painting is in the MoMA. It's still in the MoMA.
Yes, it is. And it's not that big of a painting either.
No, it's a small painting, which is very interesting because we think it's very big. So
keep in mind, everybody, keep in mind visually the painting on the right, the De Chirico, because you'll see something of that in one of Rothko's paintings that we'll show you later.
And there is many De Chirico too in the MoMA, that's in the floor.
Yeah, De Chirico is fantastic.
So out of all this, there is like two big names that we will talk about it. We talk about Duchamp on one side. So you have all the surrealist group, but Duchamp has been like really going from the Dada, from the surrealist, and Duchamp is a conceptual artist. He's going to go from the Marié descendant les escaliers with a kind of painting to the fountain in 1917. So he explored any question. And it's again the great intellectual of the surrealist movement, because it's going to be the concept base and not the painting, the concept base. Le Grand Verre, like the big glass, who is in the Philadelphia Museum, I think, will re-question. And he will question all his life, re-question all the aspects of painting. Most important for Duchamp, life is art. He destructured art by saying art is not what you see in a museum. Art is what you see on the street, what you see everywhere, because it's more when you put an object in a museum that become artwork. So Duchamp, conceptual, and we'll talk about Matisse, about the color. So very important in how he look at the world. How he's questioning everything, and that's a typical Rothko too.
And the fountain is obviously a urinal turned on its back.
Yeah.
And it created a stir, it created all this criticism, it created craziness in the art world, not just from the critics, but also from the artists. I mean, how do you get away with putting a urinal in a museum or entering it into a show and making it like, calling it art?
Because the idea of the ready-made, this was a Duchamp idea. I take everything I can find, I put it in the museum, it become a museum piece. There is no way why is an art piece, it should be like so extraordinary. Everything is art. And then is, certainly we'll talk another time about it, very influenced by the Buddhist philosophy on this, that's everything is
by the what philosophy?
philosophy. Buddhist.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so here's the effects of
Trying to get away from this.
I don't even understand them sometimes. Effects of Duchamp and Surrealism on Rothko. And these are three paintings by Rothko in the mid and early 40s. The one on the right is the one I was talking about with the reference to De Chirico. Really strong kind of, dream imagery there. And then he breaks it down and he kind of gets rid of the figure in these other two paintings and turns them into kind of a Mural experience in a way, floating figures in space. But take note, if you will, the background in the painting in the center, and think about those three, levels of rectangles that are back there, because they come to be what he spends the rest of his life doing.
Yeah, I think that this is really a following of the time. It's nothing really too breaking through. They've been breaking through so many things. So it's a continuation of something, but we don't see very much of what's going to happen soon, but it's in progress. So it was important to show you how it goes from this to this, and it goes slowly to where it's going to be next. And then we're going to see when the real Rothko come up.
Right, and the painting on the left, the slow swirl at the edge of the sea, was a very, very important painting for him.
That's very important.
Rather a large canvas, and it really got the attention of gallery people like Betty Parsons and Peggy Guggenheim, and of course, other artists and the art scene in New York City. Yeah. So influences, I mentioned Milton Avery. Milton Avery was a big influence on him. You can see the flatness of Avery. And this whole idea of flat space, of pushing the space up to the surface, was very, very important to the painters, the New York School painters, who they were referred to as. And so you can see the comparison between Rothko here and Avery in a very strong way. And also notice, from an artistic standpoint, the color and also the way Avery splits the background in thirds again.
But he's still connected with a group. He's connected with other people doing exactly very similar things. So we see things who are from this time. He doesn't differentiate himself so much yet. It's gonna come. So you will see, that's really what's interesting, how slowly and suddenly we have a cut and we're gonna see what happens. So just as we follow through this time.
Again, the color, take note of the color. And so this blew my mind. When I found this painting on the left, done by Milton Avery, I couldn't believe that it was not a Rothko. This is a Rothko on the right, but Avery was influenced by Rothko as much as Rothko was influenced by Avery.
Yeah.
So then, his friendship and kinship with Adolf Gottlieb was very, very strong. They were on radio shows together. They painted pictures. I don't think they ever collaborated, but they were of the same mind when it came to vocabulary in their work and trying to establish new forms of myth, new symbols that they could use, and make some kind of a new language, if you will.
And you can see the surrealists are super present, because the painting at the middle, it could be a Mark Ernst, it could be influenced by Johan Mural. So they are still under this great influence, who's there, within the US, because they all are there. Now here, Picasso and Buñuel, also even the filmmaker, everybody is here because of the work. So they are really connected with this. But obviously, we are not yet to this cut who is going to make him going to. We're getting there. But again, remember, like I said to Michael all the time, it takes a lifetime to go to be who you are. It's not such an easy process. People are painting for 20, 30 years, to get to the point that we say it's a Picasso, or we say it's a Jackson Pollock, or it's a Rothko. It takes many years of interesting and reflecting work, and it's what we're looking at now.
But the philosophy and the psychology that Gerard was talking about before with Nietzsche and Carl Jung, it's in there. It's in their heads. It's in their discussions. They're drinking together and talking about these guys so that they can really bond, in a way that's a little different than other
Yes,
folks.
they are intellectual. The word intellectual all the time, it's a negative word by people, but intellectual is to use your mind and reading. They're reading, they listen to music, they watch what's going on in the world. They are talking, not about stupid things. They are very well read and they talk about it. And they exchange all these ideas for many, many hours through the night and talking and trying to discover the world.
And so Greek tragedy was very important because Rothko was always talking about the human condition and the tragedy of the human condition. And there was this connection in philosophy and in intellectual thought with the Greeks and their whole view of the tragic and the dramatic tragic specifically. So in 1943, they put these two paintings into a show and got a lot of flack for it because these were images that people just didn't understand.
Yeah, I mean, all these elements of history are coming back always into their work, and is to show you too, even if they were like people of their time, they were interested by history and they were very well read about this. So all these elements are coming back, but all the time with the core of the element with like mortality. Mortality is what we're facing and what we're doing. This, So I mean, mortality is what makes people paint. I will add this for Mike to make him. It is what makes people paint. In the sense that they're not going to be here again.
You should know that the first time Gerard and I met, we got to be very good friends because we started talking about death.
Yeah, especially death.
What else could there be to make us so close?
Wow. And being Jewish doesn't make the difference, right?
Yeah, right. That's
Jewish and death, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so in 1949, an incredible thing happened. And that was that this painting called The Red Studio, Gerard, you can say the title in French.
L'Atelier Panneau Rouge, but really it's not really l'Atelier. It's not the Red Studio. It's not a good translation because it's like a studio, like a red panel. So it's not really a red studio. It's a panel or it's a vision of a red studio. It's different.
All right. Well, it's easier to say the Red Studio.
Yeah, it makes sense. Red Studio. You're right.
It makes sense. So Rothko saw this painting and he flipped. I mean, he stood in front of this painting. Some people say every day he went back to MoMA and stood in front of this painting, but I think it was maybe once or twice a week he would go because he would visit the Museum of Modern Art all the time, as well as the Metropolitan and other museums. When the Whitney opened, he went there a lot, but he saw this painting and he stood in front of this painting for hours and just kind of took it all in. And the one thing that made him feel present in this painting was the color. And the way that Matisse put this painting together with layers. The original layer of this painting was green, and then Matisse painted over with red and left some of the green. You can see the lines that he painted the lines, by pushing the paint closer together. He invites us into the room, even to make art with him by putting those crayons or pencils on the table. The first thing you see when you enter the space is the drawing elements that you could pick up and the glass that you could fill up with some wine. Yeah. But everything in the room is Matisse. Yeah. The only things that aren't Matisse, and especially the one thing that I think stands out in the focal point of the piece, right in the middle, is the clock, the grandfather clock, and notice that the grandfather clock has no hands, has no hour hands, has no minute hands. So time is suspended for the artist in the studio. So
I am not going to read this the same way as Mike, of course. Another thing to say, I think it's just color. Matisse is really the power of color. All those elements are there. They are playing a role. They are more looking at abstract elements. They don't really fill up as a really real object. What I think that Matisse is a painter of color, and no one really put the color, the pure color like he does. And of course, Rothko is like completely fascinated by this. He's fascinated by the red, certainly, and the power of the red and how it is on the painting. Even so that there is other abstract form, and it is kind of an abstract painting somehow. The color is so powerful, beautiful.
And you'll see as we go along that it was no accident that the play on Broadway was called Red, which got a lot of attention, and it was a great show. We're not going to get into that too much, but the color red is very important for many reasons, not to mention emotional, call to action, anger, and all that stuff.
And we'll
So
talk
here we
about
go with
painting,
here we go
slash painting too. Good.
I'm sorry. I wanted to put in a few of his contemporary abstract expressionist friends. Barnett Newman was a very important, very intellectual, quote, abstract expressionist, and so is Clifford Still. By the way, they all hated that term, abstract expressionist. None of the New York School painters liked that term and didn't want to be pigeonholed. And of course, a lot of them were not abstract expressionists. They were, very controlled painters like Newman and Still.
Yes, especially Barnett Newman. But all of them are like from this, they are coming from the same kind of source. They are very highly intellectual, they're very well read, they're politically involved, they are experimenting. So, they have like a strong point together to be called as a group, maybe not abstract expressionists, but they have a common point, all of them. And Rothko too.
And here they are. They got dubbed the Irascibles because they did not agree with the mainstream, with the status quo. And they were, some of them were very good friends and they all knew each other, but some like, Rothko and Newman and Pollock, of course, Pollock in the middle there, de Kooning, they became stars in the world of art in New York City. And some of them lived a long time and some of them didn't. But as a group, they were very influential, to the point where in 1950, when this picture was taken, they wrote a letter to the director, the president of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, objecting to an exhibition that was being put on there called, New American Painting. And these guys just didn't, and none of these guys were included. They didn't think that was the New American Painting. They thought that their stuff was the New American Painting.
This guy here down at the bottom that I just learned not long ago is Theodoros Stamos, was a very good friend of Mark Rothko. Much more, especially at the end of his life, they were very close. So there is some of the people here who are not really very well known, but they were still part of the group. So
yeah, but as a postscript to that, Stamos and the gallery folks who were made executors of Rothko's collection ripped him off, totally ripped him off. And it was a big lawsuit with his family against it. Was a mess. But anyway, Stamos and he were very good friends. Basiotis and Rothko were good friends.
Sure.
They stuck together, those guys. And then eventually they started hanging out in the cafe, and they had the club. They called it the club, where they just met, drank, and talked about art.
Sure. I mean, all these guys had the same vision of what art should be, different ways of doing it, but they had like a common point in, they were like the surrealists had, or the Dadaists had. It was really still a group of people interested by the same kind of things.
And they were committed. They were
very committed
to their work.
Very strong painter.
So Rothko here in his studio, you get an idea of the scale of his paintings. This painting that he's standing in front of is pretty average of size-wise of what he would do. He wanted the paintings to be human size. He wanted you to be able to almost feel like you could walk into them. He wanted them hung low on the gallery wall. And he also stipulated, well, he didn't stipulate, but he said he wanted people to get within 18 inches of his painting. So it was all there in the peripheral vision.
Yeah. It's
so now we're gonna get into it, Gerard.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely. Ready all the time. Give me some painting, give me some film, I take it.
So this is his early work. 1936, I guess, is the earliest piece. Well, no, the figurative piece is around 33, 34, when he was still in art school, on and off. But the figurative piece, influenced by, obviously, Picasso and Matisse. Picasso with the two nudes and Matisse with the bathers. But from that discovery of these artists, studying these artists, and then getting into trying to establish his own voice.
Yeah.
was something that Rothko and all the other artists wanted to do.
You know, it's something that I talk to you, Mike, all the time. I say it takes a lifetime to establish yourself as an artist with your own voice. It takes a long time to be able to go through all this influence. And this is like when you start working, we love artists, we love painters, and even unconsciously, you are influenced by them and you do things you look like them. So here we are at the beginning of this work where he's influenced by everything else and trying slowly to find his own world. So it's like common to most of the painters who ever start to work on some from art form, not even painting, music or film or anything, you know, trying to find your voice.
Anything creative, you know.
Anything creative. You have to have a father figure. You have to have a figure who would give you the way of wanted to do something, you know. It doesn't come from nowhere, you know. You have people that you admire and that you want to be close to somehow and take some of their techniques or their way of doing it, or and continue to grow as a person by using them and becoming a better painter, a better artist.
And if you can find somebody like Gerard who inspires one to go the extra yard when you're together, that's really an amazing thing. One thing I wanted to say here was the painting in the middle. For those of you who know this painting, I put it sideways on purpose to show you how, you know, Rothko was looking at color and how the background pushing that space up. You know, you get rid of these figures and you get rid of those what were verticals when the painting is on its proper side. You have a Rothko, you know, you have a multiform almost, and it's incredible to see some of the hints in his work, in his early work, that lead you to what he later, you know. Because
this is a figurative painting. If you turn it to the figurative painting, it's people going in. You know what? It's funny that you're saying this, because you remind me of Rauschenberg. And in this kind of situation, you know, I see Rauschenberg inside. So all this is like moving along and trying to find some connection, but it's moving.
So he did in 36, from 36 to 38, he went underground, so to speak. The painting on the left is one of his subway paintings. Did a number of these paintings of the subway, of people in the subway. And you can even see with this kind of thing where he has, you know, the fields of color behind in the background and then the horizontals coming in, and not much perspective. I mean, the perspective is there, but it's not, it's still kind of pushing out toward us.
And it's still figurative. It's still a figurative painting. You know, the figures are still there, and it's what he started with. And you're going to see how the figures are disappearing as we move forward.
Whoops.
So this is a good example too. You know, I mean, this is really when you see that, like, the progression, it's what we loved. You know, when we worked on this, I say how unbelievable is to go with like people who are definitely drawing kind of a traditional to slowly go into something with more like a surrealist painting, and slowly this surrealist painting in this shape becoming fuzzy and being opening up with kind of like stain of painting. So the painting on the far right is really a preview what he's going to do. You know, you can see it right away that all these paintings as block are going to become real block. So that is, again, how an artist come from step to this. It's his own way of experimenting to try to find something who seems to be like him. So it's a great progression of painting. I think it's good slides.
And the shapes, this quote that I put up here: every shape becomes an organic entity, inviting the multiplicity of associations inherent in all living things. That's pretty heavy when you start thinking about it, but we won't get into thinking about that too much. We're going to keep going with Rothko's paintings, but the painting in the center of all this is very interesting because it's kind of muted pastel colors. And it is true that Rothko, you know, did do a lot of drawing in pastel, and you'll see that later. He kind of goes back to that later. But that painting in the center, remember that painting, that it's a kind of a painting / drawing, because I think he kept that piece and looked at it a lot later on. And also the one on the right that Gerard was mentioning. Think about that when we go to the next segment of his work, which is called the multiform paintings, which he did for about 3 years.
That's right.
And this is, like Gerard said, this is actually beginning to look, you know, more like Rothko as we know him.
The only thing that is not a Rothko there is like the specificity of the square and the geometrical forms. They're not there yet. So everything is like block of painting who are not really defined by a line, but we can see that it's coming because from the one on the left to the one on the right, you see that there is a search of composition, and it's composition. He composed the painting with color, was still have like a composition attitude as a painter, you know, like kind of a traditional. And at the same time, the square and the geometrical, you know, form are coming out, you know, and as you can see it, you know, as we go forward, you're going to see it. And this is really a very important point. 1949, I think it's one of the most important in his life, because he's going to go in another few months. It's where he goes on his trip, actually, right? It's 1949, 21, his trip. So you have this, he's in search of something. 1949, everything is going up. It's after war. Everything is moving along. There is a lot of energy. And he's going to make the jump to the real Rothko very soon.
And also, these paintings are sort of an illustration in discovery. He's painting and painting and painting, and he's discovering these forms. They're coming out of the process. And then, like Gerard said, composition is very important. The implication of lines where the colors and the shapes butt up against each other, creating lines and edges. In some cases floating, in some cases not floating, in some cases they're going back, in some cases they're coming forward, which is Hans Hofmann's philosophy of push and pull. You know, all this stuff was going on then.
Yeah. And, you know, Mondrian was working around this area a little bit after, you know, so all this geometric idea becomes like acceptable. You know, we are going towards, why not? You know, I mean, of course, Barnett Newman and Kline, all of them are doing it, but he's going to go more towards really what he thinks is going to be having a calling for him very soon. You're going to see certainly on the next couple of slides, we'll see this.
Okay, so I put this in, Gerard. This is a surprise. I put this in because in 1949, he goes to Italy and it changes his life, right? And he sees the Bosco Catracci paintings, the Boscarol paintings. He goes to Pompeii, spends a lot of time in Italy. But again, look at this painting and take away the figures. And what do you have?
It's color. The color in the back are really a Rothko because, you know, between the two red, you know, the light red and the dark red. I mean, it's what happened. It's what happened. All of these are influence who are working on the person to bring wherever he's going. So obviously, you know, I mean, I remember when I studied painting, I spent a lot of time in Italy. I was looking at, you know, Quattrocento painting when I was more interested by abstract painting, but influence you. Good painting are all good painting, you know, so.
Right, and these are, you know, like 200 AD, 100 AD, old paintings.
There is no way.
So he comes back from Italy and he paints this in 1949, violet, black, orange, yellow, and red. By the way, the titles, most of his paintings are not titled because he didn't want to influence the viewer in any way. But you know, in the beginning he would title them as he would see them and the colors he used, and this was what he did. But later on, it was basically all untitled and just untitled in the date. Maybe sometimes in parentheses you'd have something. But the quote here, I wanted to really make a point of you know, reading to you all, because I think it really kind of pinpoints one of the aspects that goes deep into his thinking. Rothko abhorred, and this is, by the way, I got this from the markrothko.org website, and I just found it really very interesting. He abhorred being viewed as a formalist abstract artist whose foremost intent was to arrange colored fields on a flat canvas. He insisted that his art concerned the distillation of human experience, both tragic and ecstatic, to its purest form. Yeah. Really very important concept.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole concept of Rothko, but what I think it's very interesting, and that I discover as we're talking about, how is this 1949 points are got, you know, really switching. Now we are in a real Rothko, you know, certainly in a few months of traveling, maybe some reflection and some looking at it, to come to something with his work. And this, that what you are looking at 1949 is going to be changing a little bit, but not so much. We are still in this pure ecstasy, pure connection with the human spirit and experience. And this is what he's looking. He's not looking at anything else. He's not looking at an aesthetic work. He's not looking at composition. You look at how is this going to be an emotional experience. And just one thing I want to say, and we'll continue with this very fast. My first experience with Rothko was in the Tate Gallery when I was 18 years old. I went to London and I saw the Rothko Room. And this was certainly the greatest emotional experience as a vision I had, because this was like a spiritual experience.
So that's what's behind me. That's the Tate installation.
Yeah. Always been there forever, actually.
So I wanted to throw this up because when you experience a Rothko, you have to experience a Rothko in person. And if you don't, it's just not the same. These are two reproductions of the exact same painting, and you can see the difference in color. The paintings are, structured the same way, but the colors are completely different. And this is what happens when you try to, reproduce his work. It just doesn't work. You have to be in the presence of a Rothko to experience it the right way.
Because it's more than just two colors together. It's the size, it's the environment, it's how it's put together, how do you feel where you are in it. All these elements are super important. I mean, it's what I was saying to Michael too. It's like when you see the water lilies of Claude Monet in the Orangerie in Paris, where the room is completely circular and you're sitting at the middle. You have a spiritual experience. You are watching like painting should be watched, not through a piece of paper. It's very different.
But if you look at the, the lines on the side here in this painting, and then you take them and move them into horizontal, this is what he begins to do in 1949. And it really does have a powerful effect to the point where he goes, into this color arena, and he wants to get into, making colors, creating colors. He didn't necessarily do it the right way because it's a conservator's nightmare at this point, trying to get these paintings back to what they are supposed to be. But his goal was to make color both area and volume, emotion and mood, very important, palpable, disembodied, sensuous, yet spiritual. So the color is a doorway into another reality, into a reality that he wants us to enter and experience on an emotional level.
I really think that the size too has a lot to do with it. The size of a Rothko, when you look at it and when you are in front of, as much as you look at the material and how it's made, but it's really majestuous. To see a big Rothko in front of you and surrounded by this, there's nothing like that. So for people who want to experiment a Rothko instead of listening people saying, oh, everybody can do this, the idea of to go there is a really, really great. It's a really great way of looking at it. It's to be there.
Yeah,
it's a physical experience. It's physical. It's a physical painting. It's not even so intellectual and spiritual, but it's physical too. You have to feel it.
And he lets us see the brushstrokes. He lets us see the layers. He lets us see. He uses color very, very intellectually in a way, because you have to know what a color underneath is going to do, the effect that it's going to have on the color above it. So, complementary colors were important, which are opposites on the color wheel. And if you put a green under a red, the red's going to push, the red's going to come out at you. And it's just a natural way that we see color. And he knew all this. He knew the color theories of all these guys who were studying color, like Joseph Albers, who I'll show you in a minute. But a very, very emotional thing that happened to him in 1954, which, by the way, well, I won't even go there. 1954.
You old dude.
Matisse dies, and Matisse was his hero. And so he does an homage to Matisse, light, earth, and blue. And my feeling is that the top square of the piece here is Rothko himself, is like a self-portrait, and the bottom rectangle is Matisse. And of course,
I think you think too much, Michael. I think it's like
Matisse is, at least he makes Matisse bigger than himself.
I mean, the color is there. The color is powerful. It's so beautiful. The blue, you're right. The blue, it's really remind me of Matisse. But these colors are so powerful. And why are they so powerful? This is really always my question. Because they are pure color. Or yeah, there is some mix, but very little. Interesting. It's chemistry and it's talent. Talent is something we cannot explain. You can have 20 people making the same painting, and these 20 people will not do a Rothko, like when we talk about Pollock, the same way. There's something
Well, and also you can have 20 people looking at these paintings and having a completely different experience.
Absolutely. Some of them crying and being completely destroyed emotionally, and somebody laughing at it, you know? And we see this all the time, you know.
So this is an example of other minimal colorists who were doing work at the time. On the left is Joseph Albers, who spent his life working with different types of color. Homage to the Square was his lifelong journey into what effect colors have on each other. And Ad Reinhardt, who was originally kind of a cubist, collagist, was also friends with Rothko. And he did a lot of these lithographs that dealt with different bands, horizontals and verticals of color. Very interesting. But the big difference here is the hard edge, the hard edge of these shapes that are far from the soft and brush stroke kind of edges of Rothko.
And it does not have the spiritual dimension. They are beautiful paintings. They are geometric. They remind me like the Mondrian approach, with a kind of like more mathematical and more structure. Rothko is not about that. Rothko is not about structure. He's not about color. He's about how is this giving you a breeze of spirituality. Look at this painting. I mean, this is like absolutely amazing how it just vibrates. It looks like it's something was coming out. And when you see it in reality, it really vibrates. It's like, wow.
And this becomes the work. This becomes it. This is it. He spends the rest of his life until 1970, from 56 to 1970, doing these paintings in various, various forms and various colors. And as his son Christopher said, the human factor with all its fallibility is present everywhere for Rothko. That's what he was about.
Yeah, and if one makes his difference, what he makes his talent, what makes who he is, it's like what he differentiates from everyone else, so pretty.
And so to answer the question that many people have regarding Rothko, I mean, if you compare Rothko to Pollock, for example, or to Kooning, I mean, there's all kinds of action and there's all kinds of dripping and throwing paint and brush strokes and just, wonderful elements. And Rothko was very, very, very straightforward. Is that your dog?
Yes, my dog.
My dog's going, calm down, Rauschenberg. My dog's going to go nuts. So this kind of design may look simple, but it usually takes me many hours to get the proportions and colors just right. This is Rothko talking now. Everything has to lock together. And then he throws in a little bit of humor and a little bit of like the everyman idea. I guess I'm pretty much just a plumber. Like he's just doing it. He's just working. He's just a guy, doing his job.
Yeah, and again, what I just told you a few minutes ago, I think the most difficult in painting is not to fill up a canvas, is not to try to have all this element, all figure. The most difficult is to keep simple, the simplicity, and having at the same time of simplicity, this effect that you want. So Rothko was really quote unquote, he was never satisfied. He was really questioning everything, but he was kind of doing the same painting or the same style for 13 years or, all the time the same things, this time the same research. So it's the effect of it with a simplicity. Like there is this very good story we talk about Picasso, when Picasso got this bird and somebody tell him, how long did it take you to do this, making fun of him, saying it takes 2 minutes. And he said, it takes me all my life. Right. This is what it takes all the life of a painter to come to this. It's not such an obvious thing for most of the people.
He also said, and this is my favorite Picasso quote, and people who know me know this, art is a lie that makes us realize the truth. And I think Rothko was about that. Yeah.
And there's
Look at
another
Rothko,
one.
It's an illusion. I mean, art's not real. Of course it's not. Even the real art isn't real. It's a window.
Yeah.
But it makes us think about stuff. It makes us human.
It's a window to your emotion. It's a window to the spirituality and to the understanding of the world. Without art, the world does not hold. This is a very important thing to know. But
now, Rothko didn't give much information about his paintings and didn't want to talk about his work. And I scoured the internet for a Rothko interview to share with you all, but There was nothing there. I couldn't find anything. So the only thing I found was he gave this talk at Pratt Institute, which, by the way, is where I went to graduate school for my MFA. And he talked about a recipe for his work, for any work, and what he thought would work as a recipe. First, there must be a clear preoccupation with death. And I knew Gerard would love this.
Oh, I love that. This is like a
clear preoccupation with death.
That's for
And
sure.
then the other bullet points that he he kind of got into more in depth, but sensuality, tension, irony, wit, and play. Got to be playful, the ephemeral and chance. You got to give up some of the control. You have to have that happy accident. Hope makes the tragic concept more endurable. And then he says, I measure these ingredients very carefully when I paint a picture.
Yeah.
And it's really incredible to think about these kinds of things going through his mind when he's doing this.
Yeah, I still think that he has like this, ability to connect with his painting in such a higher level of spirituality. And after he might say something about it, but it's another person who does this. It's a vision. It's a vision of some kind who is really extraordinary.
Totally.
And I want to remind you that no one ever does what Rothko does, even if they think that it's easy to do. No one will do this what he did.
Nobody does it like him.
Even so, it's so easy to do it. Yet show me.
No. He got into, in 1958, he got into doing murals as a result of a commission that he got from the Seagram's organization, the liquor organization. But he was actually commissioned by Philip Johnson, the architect, because Johnson knew about him and wanted him to be the artist that Seagram's put into their Four Seasons restaurant. So these are two paintings that he did with thinking about putting them into the restaurant. He went to the restaurant with his wife one night and had dinner there and was completely turned off by the entire situation, and did not want to do the commission. He gave back the money, which was, by the way, in today's dollars, about $135,000. The commission was then 35,000, but he really felt terrible about the people who were eating there, that they were too, highfalutin and aristocratic, if you will, and just didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So the other murals that he did were, there's a mural series at Harvard University. There's a mural series at the Tate, and of course the Rothko Chapel is another one. But you see here The Last Judgment, which is one of the few paintings he titled, and I think he wanted people in that restaurant, when he was thinking about actually putting these paintings on the wall, he wanted them to have an experience like you have when you go to the Sistine Chapel and you see Michelangelo's painting Last Judgment.
I mean, this is coming to be, again, like much more majestuous and much more like strong as a painting. Even if it's the same kind of paintings, there is a process, there is not progress, but something who makes it even more spiritual vision of a painting. 1958, I mean, it's like it's
and these are verticals, by the way, instead of horizontals, which is kind of rare for him. So what happened with the Seagram's commission was he did the paintings and he sent them to the Tate for them to house in a gallery. Oh, this is a quote from what he said after he had dinner with his wife at Four Seasons. I hope to ruin the appetite of every son of a bitch who eats in that room. And I thought that was pretty funny.
I love that. I think it's a great quote.
Yeah. So this is where they ended up in 1970. He the same day that he killed himself was the day that they arrived.
Yeah.
At the
1970.
Right?
Yeah.
Very strange. Serendipitous.
Yeah, it's really like this.
This is the Harvard University mural that he did in 1965. Really kind of a powerful image and different from his other work.
Different. He reminds me a little bit Motherwell somehow. I don't know why. It's
Motherwell,
not like it's kind of like
Spanish elegy.
Yeah, it's not like a typical Rothko somehow. So I mean, but interesting. I didn't know this painting. I think it's pretty beautiful.
I just found it today. I didn't see this before.
Yeah, I didn't see that before.
And here is the Rothko Room at the Tate with this is not the Seagram's. These aren't the Seagram's paintings, but so he had these paintings made and while he was alive, and they promised to make a Rothko Room for him, because he would insist, like Clifford Still, to if you're going to show my paintings, they all need to be shown together.
Yeah.
They need to be shown low on the wall so that people can get up close and feel like they can enter into them. And in this particular example, you see those things on the floor there. He actually sent with the paintings these cardboard designs, these cardboard cutouts that imitated the sizes of the paintings, so that the curators could and the designers could rearrange them in the room and see how they best, felt.
Yeah, and you think about it, it's really a conceptual idea that to put all your painting, and there's a place where they are is as important as the paintings themselves. I mean, we can look at conceptual artists who take a room and they make an environment or they make a place. It's the same idea. This is not just painting.
It's like a site-specific installation.
Yeah,
kind of like
it's
Christo.
an installation. It's absolutely an installation, but with painting. And I found this fascinating that if you had to painting by painting, it will not give you the same affect. The whole aspect of it's your involvement emotionally in the way of how you look at the painting in the environment. Very, very fascinating.
So reaching for the sublime, of course, the sublime was a really important element in Rothko's work and in his, heart and him as a human being. And these paintings do reach that level of, religious kind of experience. And he said, I'm not an abstractionist. I'm interested only in expressing basic human emotions, tragedy, ecstasy, doom, and so on. I don't know what he means by so on.
Oh, and all the rest of life with it, certainly. Everything was to be with life. But like in 1960, we are really on the last stretch, because the last 10 years are going to be like the most beautiful, I think, really the most extraordinary painting. And
here's an example of his work in the 60s.
Yes.
Beautiful. 3 examples, actually. Different,
but common too. Yeah.
Different things that he's doing.
But still.
But they're all basically, these large 93 by 80 inch canvases that are very, very imposing.
And beautiful too. Beautiful color.
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful.
Very different color. Something like really experimenting the color, as we're gonna see at the end. How it's gonna talk to black and white and darker color. That's
right. And we're running low on time, so let's move.
Yeah, we're gonna go a little bit. So that's
some of the later work in the 60s. Now of course he dies in 1970. So he was had a history of depression, up and down all the time. He probably was bipolar or something. I mean, I don't know.
Well, we know that he take a lot of antidepressant and medication. He was really under heavy medication. We know that.
And he drank too.
He drank. He did, but
everybody drank in those days.
Yeah. Medication was a big thing, So, I mean, actually, when we, about his death, when they found out, when they took his blood, they realized that he took a lot of barbituric and antidepressant, So. Yeah.
But look at the difference here, especially the difference between the Untitled 1964 and the other two, where he has a pretty hard edge on this shape in that painting, which is unusual for him. I think he was still investigating this idea of of the edge of the canvas, the edge of existence, the edge of space, the spatial relationships between dark and mid-tone and light and all that kind of good stuff.
And it is, like, even if it's the same, it is different. All these are very individual pieces, even if he experiments things in the same thread. So he's like in search, for sure.
Well, he did, I read somewhere that he did about 836 of these paintings.
Yeah.
About 836.
I'm not surprised. He lived in this studio most of the time, One story that I have, and I know this story, it's a very good story. In 1962, Rockefeller come to see Rothko in this studio, and he bought him one of his paintings for $1,200. Okay, that's a really funny story, $1,200. And when they sold this, when Rockefeller sold again this painting, it was $65 million. So from $1,200 to $65 million in certainly 20 or 25 years, So,
yeah. And the most recent painting, I think I read somewhere he sold was 180 million.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think it's one of the most valuable painter in the art world today.
Yeah.
This is what like the Impressionist was for one time. Now it's absolute expressionist. And here we are at the end.
Yeah. So in 1969, 1970, he does this series of
Yeah.
gray paintings, black and gray paintings. Some people say that it was the influence of the landing on the moon, but I'm not buying it.
No, I don't
I think he was just kind of going,
experiments.
he was focusing in and limiting and editing out and seeing what color could do in another way.
Yeah. But I think it's still in the same thread. It's continuing the same thing in a different color, because we say, oh, it's always color. So he said, let me try something different and go into this. And there is still color, but the color are like tuned, in kind of grayish, some yellowish, very beautiful, very, very beautiful paintings,
And the big difference for me, the big difference in these paintings is he's going all the way to the edge.
Yeah. No, you're right. It makes a big difference. There is no more rectangle at the middle of the canvas. It's like all of it. It's like more like an horizon. We look at it, it's more like a landscape of an horizon. It's what I'm looking at it, and it's really fascinating, beautiful.
With no figures. It's
no figures.
Just the horizon line.
And minimalist again, more and more is like getting away from everything to get to something very absolutely so simple.
This is the era of less is more.
Yeah, it's not the era. Today too. Good painters can do, at the end of their life, I think they get to something a little bit more crucial and centered,
So he also went back into color toward the end of his life. These pictures on the right are actually pastels.
Yeah.
And I remember, if you will, back when I mentioned the pastel drawing in the center of the triad that we had. These are colors from that time period. They're kind of muted pastel-y colors, but I think he was moving into another area of investigation and not giving up on this lifelong journey into what he was about. What he was trying to, and that's his daughter, by the way. They're giving a talk about his work, and his final work here is a color work. 1970.
Yeah, and it's they say that this was not a finished work too. What I have been looking at it. They say it was one of the unfinished work, and it is last work. That by many people, and this work was done very, very closely before he killed himself in 1970. So that it's really a very big thing. And like talking about Red, the show, I think it's a lot about this last painting too. People have been talking a lot about it.
And I guess a lot of people have theories about why. The question is, why did he kill himself? A lot of people have theories about it.
Yeah, some people think he didn't too. I just read something, a big thing that he did not kill himself. Something happened to him. And I tell you a little about the story, but it's kind of, everybody found a reason. That's what's same with all the artists, he mentioned, the only thing we know that he mentioned about suicide is like a little bit early to his assistant. He said, when I will kill myself, everybody will know that it's what he told them. And he never left anything. He didn't left a letter or anything else. But we know that with instability psychologically, he was so unstable. It's not surprising. But there was a lot of theory about this, because they say, interesting theories, they say that when they found him laying down on the floor, he did not have his glasses. And they say that he could not see anything without his glasses. So it seems that he went somewhere and he cut him. That's crazy theory. They say he cut himself and he fell and he passed out, and some kind of, how people find all the time story. But really interesting is that there is no trace about what did he do. There is no letter left. Nothing is, nobody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what happened.
It's an unknown.
Unknown. Yeah. But people have been doing too a lot of thinking about, okay, cutting your vein. I hope nobody here around cut their vein, but if you cut your vein and you let the blood going on the floor, it's a Rothko. It's a Rothko painting. This is like the theory of some people saying that you will just paint until the last breath, before you die.
We're at like 10 after 8, and so I don't think we have time for this little video here.
No.
But it's interesting. If you want to go on YouTube and just type in Rothko Chapel, the Rothko Chapel is an incredible place. We are at the end. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And this is Gerard and I in front of a painting that we did. But Joanne, if you would come back on and see if anybody has any questions. I think Larry Strong has raised his hand.
Yes, go right ahead.
Oh.
People
we
are
hear
saying
Larry?
thank you. If anyone has any questions, let's see.
Please, we are
Does
here
the
for
Tate
that.
still have the Rothko Room exhibit?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, yes. And I tell you, it's one of the places when I go to England, it's my first stop. I've been there a few times in my life, and it's always a great experience. Certainly, I will say, I said to Michael, certainly my strongest experience in paintings as a young man. I was like 17 or 18 years old. It's mid-70s or something like this.
So the Rothko Chapel, by the way, is in Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
And that video has Gary Tintero talking about it, who used to be a curator at the Metropolitan Museum. And I knew him pretty well. He's a great guy. But the Rothko Chapel, it's on my bucket list. I've never been there.
Yeah, no, I love to go to, Michael. Maybe we should go together.
We should go together.
Take a trip. No, I mean, seriously, I think it's something that I would like to do. I really would like to do that.
Anyone, just type them in the chat, type them in the Q&A if you have any more questions. And I want to let everybody know that this video will be on our YouTube channel, as is the first in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a question in regards to his most famous work. What do you guys think was the turning point for Rothko?
Yeah.
And also,
I think we both agree that it was, the first trip he took to Italy.
Yeah, when he come back from that, it's completely different. He has certainly an epiphany when he goes there, because he's like in the process. And when he comes, after this, a Rothko is a Rothko. Can you see this Rothko is better than the other one? We have like 15 years of a Rothko, and they're all following the same pattern. So his discovery where he finds his own voice is what I will say is the most important. So, when he comes back from Italy.
cool. And here's a great question. Where do we go in New York for the fullest experience?
The MoMA. The MoMA is more than the Met.
Yeah.
Right, Mike?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
the
the
Met
Met.
better. Now the MoMA has few great Rothko. I think it's no problem. You should go to the MoMA, and unless we'll have like an exhibition coming soon, but I don't know anything about it right now. There was one in when did I went to see Rothko exhibition a few years ago? In Caucasian. He had something like this downtown about a Rothko about like 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But besides this, you go to the MoMA and you see some great Rothko.
Sean mentioned that the quote that Rothko that we didn't mention, which is silence is so accurate, and that's
Absolutely.
Something that happens
Beautiful.
when you go. I've heard that Christopher Rothko is like the head of the board of the Rothko Chapel, and he said that when he's in there and someone else comes in, it's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
If you're in there alone, the silence is deafening.
Yeah. It's a religious experience, I mean, I'm not religious, but when I say religious experience, it's a lone experience, looking at what divine is. Rothko is for me a perception or like an image of the divine. I mean, it's really crazy to say that, but it's what I think,
No, it's true.
The closest feelings that I can have from a religious experience.
Yeah.
And one more question. What was the size of his largest painting?
The size of his largest painting? I don't know.
Well, he was like, no, you know what? He paint most of it on the same kind of format. I don't remember any Rothko being like a full mural. If it's a mural, it's cut by 2 or 3 panels like we do, Michael, right? I mean, it's not, like the Rothko by itself is like this dimension of like, I would say, height about 12 height, 11, 12, height on.
Well, most of them are about 9 feet.
Yeah, something like
9 feet high, and probably the widest one is the one at Harvard.
Yeah, that might be, But again, it's they are very similar in size. They're all very wide and very big, and like as a human size, a little bit more bigger than a human size, and it's always very similar. You don't see a lot of differences in size.
Sean is saying that at nearly 8 feet high, number 7, Dark Over Light, belongs to a select group of canvases that were among the largest. Mark Rothko. He must have looked it up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's like, is this that you know, I mean, I don't want to say it, but this is as important, you know. So important, like when you go over a size of a human being, that it's already like having the impact, you know, it's what I think, you know.
Oh, and you get a sense with the, you know, the image that's behind me in my background, you get a sense of the size in a room.
This is typical. This is the typical size of a Rothko, you know, I mean, and he had an assistant too, people don't forget that, you know, but he painted an assistant who helped him because this is very difficult to paint canvas of this size because it can be, it's physical, you know, I mean, I remember Gerard, Richter and all these people painting, when you see them in documentaries, they have people doing a lot of things for them because as Rothko was going into the 60s, it's not so easy to schlep things around and put it up and everything else.
That's what we do.
Well,
we're the schleppers.
The schlepper, you know.
No, he also had a pretty serious heart condition toward the end of his 60s, middle of his 60s, I mean, or early 60s, or whatever it was, 63, 64. And his doctor told him to slow down with, you know, working so large and stuff. And that's when he started doing some of those pastel drawings. But he would originally build them himself, build his canvases himself, and you know, really go at it, you know, in a big way.
It's a physical job. You can see it. We know that because we do like this thing when we do it. It's a physical work. It's not just you know, it's something which is difficult to carry and to do, and even to paint. Sometimes it's difficult to keep a clear eye on it and going back and forth. So pretty amazing.
Well, the one thing that's different about the abstract expressionists as a whole, I would say, is that they use their entire body to make paintings.
Yeah.
Instead of standing at an easel, you know, going inch by inch, they use their entire body. And I mean, someone like Cy Twombly, for instance, would put a large paintbrush at the end of a broomstick, and, you know, move like, you know, he was all over the place.
Remember, they used to call this gestural painting because gestural and action and everything else was really very important to be into this physical aspect of it, especially with people like Jackson Pollock. But
I'm going to do one last question, if you can. Alfred Molina's Rothko portrait in the play Red felt remarkable. How did you feel about that performance?
Amazing performance. Just incredible. You're absolutely right. Incredible. It's a good word for it. Fantastic.
It's a beautiful place to end then. Thank you guys. I learned a lot.
Yes,
for sure.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to Jean-Claude and Christo in September. Right?
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll be in touch, but anybody who wants to watch this again, like I said, it'll be on our YouTube channel, or if you missed the first one, that is on our YouTube channel as well. So thank you again.
Thank you to
you, everybody.
Thank you to everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.